Yo, check it, everybody. Welcome to a Monday edition of the Monday Overreaction Show. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That is Anwar Richardson. This show brought to you by RogueShop.com. It's 11:30 in the morning, and I haven't even engaged in any Rogue products yet.
Boo.
That's when you know kids are at home.
Yes.
You're outside of your normal routine. It's 11:30, and I'm not yet enjoying my Rogue. Go to RogueShop.com, though. Use that promo code Orangebloods and get that discount, that 25% off discount for Texas's home for legal CBD, THC, and so much more. Welcome to all the guys who are already in the chat. Rodolfo, Eric, Andrew Lilly, lots of Rodolfo.
Drew.
Do us a solid. Slam that like button. Subscribe to the channel because my son, Onward, you can appreciate this. Your son has a YouTube channel that we kind of mostly keep on the down low just because we don't want people like stalking our kids. My son, the same thing. He asked me earlier today how many YouTube subscriptions I thought he would have by the time he was done growing up. He's convinced that he's going to lap us. He keeps up with our numbers more than I do. And he's convinced that once he gets his Hendrix YouTube channel going, that it's just a matter of time before old dad and Orangebloods gets left in the dust. So I've let him know, our goal is to keep climbing so that by the time he's grown up, he can have a taller goal than our current mission to get to 15,000 subscribers. And if you're not subscribed right now, by all means, please do so. We're really close to hitting 15,000. And then we set our next goal, 16, 17, 18, and beyond, obviously 20 and beyond. Onward.
Yeah, hold on. So I think I told you this. So my kid, Max, I've had to take him to practice, before, sometimes you just don't get a sitter. They have a whatever. So he's been down at UT before. I've had pictures of him when he was a lot younger next to like the Earl Campbell stuff and the Ricky Williams trophy and things to that effect. There was one time he had an opportunity to meet like Tom Herman, and I was doing an exchange. He got to meet Tom Herman in the parking lot. He had cared nothing and knows nothing about what I do in life, right? It just white noise to him, right? Until he knew I was on YouTube. And then all of a sudden, things changed for him. And he was like, "You're on YouTube?" I'm like, "Yeah." And that's the only time he's there. So then, like, your kid started paying attention to the numbers and everything to that effect. Now, I'm still not quite sure he grasps everything that I do because he doesn't really listen to it. But he is very YouTube obsessed. And so, like yours, he cares about that. He has a goal. But it is hilarious to me that my kids are so oblivious to anything I do in life other than knowing that Dad does some stuff on YouTube.
I was such a sports freak at such a young age, like reading the sports section as soon as I could possibly read. If my dad had done what we do, I'd have been like high on life.
Yeah.
Our kids are exactly the same. They just, the other day, somebody Texas Tech or somebody with Texas in their name was playing a game somewhere. My daughter got excited, and I was like, "No, it's not. It's different. It's not the same. Just so you know,
totally different."
Spring football, it's back. The basketball team continues to win, and yet it's hard for us. And our primary jobs on Orangebloods is the football team. They're back in action tomorrow, and it really is for me the start of spring football. With all due respect to the week before spring break that took place 2 weeks ago. There are 12 practices left. The majority of them will be in pads. There will be scrimmages. The stakes of what's on the line for a lot of these guys. Not everybody is Xavier Worthy or, Jalen Ford or somebody like that, where it's like, okay, they've got their spots and it's about getting as good as they can possibly be. The real competition for playing time at positions where playing time is really up for grabs, the impact of true freshmen, like all of these things I think really take on a different weight starting tomorrow when practice resumes. So buckle up. Here we go. Now for the next month or so, spring football really takes its place at the top of the food chain with what it is that we do, with all due respect to a basketball team that might still be playing for a couple of more weeks. So here we go. Buckle up.
Yeah, Catch. I mean, I think this is where the rubber meets the road, essentially for a lot of guys because, Catch, we're at a kind of a state, and I think Sark is kind of this thing where once you come out of spring, for the most part, your depth chart is pretty much solidified. There may be a competition here or there that has to continue into the fall. But for the most part, 20 of the 22 are going to be decided more than likely. And then your two deep is maybe just, who goes in past that. So, I mean, I think this is, for a couple of layers, right? Catch, for the kids who were the early enrollees, this gives them more of an opportunity to kind of solidify themselves within that two deep. The guys that we've talked about, like the Jonte Cooks, the, Moores, Peyton Kirkland, those kind of guys who are on there. Colton Vasek has been a guy that Sark has named. So some of those young guys, it's a good opportunity for them. I mean, we'll get into obviously the quarterback situation. Will be interesting to see on Tuesday what's going on with Malik. Is he out there? Is he practicing? Like, that's going to be huge for him. And so, yeah, the next couple of weeks really end up being the things that I think will do. It will come out of spring. And there's not going to be, because there's just not going to be a ton of movement on the depth chart once we get out of spring. Like, once we know who that two deep is, it is who it is. So, the next few weeks are just crucial for those guys who are in competition battles. And I think we'll know exactly what this team looks like, not from a performance standpoint, but just from a depth chart standpoint by the time that spring game happens.
Yeah, and it's not that the two-a-days in August or practice in August aren't important. It's just that they get about a week into those August workouts, and then they really do start looking ahead. They want their quarterback determined. Position battles kind of get locked up because they really do begin to focus on, okay, we got to start being good as a team. They'll report in August, and in 4 weeks they'll play Alabama. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Just the mentality changes. Let's go by position,
okay,
and talk about the big questions starting this week. And if we start with quarterback and do the offense first, I think the big one is the backup quarterback position. Will Malik Murphy even be available? I don't know. He doesn't seem like a guy that's been a week away. And they're so unforgiving with the lack of information that they truly want to give us with regards to injuries, that he could be a day away, he could be a month away. It can be difficult to ascertain what the real truth is there. You and I have been working with the idea that, man, he really does need to get back, or this is going to be Arch Manning's job with the second string by default eventually. Tomorrow, if Malik's not out there, I'm going to start wondering if he's even going to be available at all during the spring. It doesn't feel like Sarkisian's given us any absolutes there. Like, I don't recall him saying, oh, yeah, no, Malik will definitely be back by the end of March, per se. Like, it hasn't exactly gone like that. It's been much more up in the air. And I feel like he's a guy, you and I both do, he has to get on the field.
Yeah, but I think this is where our, years in the business is where we can do some deductive reasoning, where we've got 50 to 60 combined years between us in this business or industry. Malik Murphy didn't go anywhere for spring break. He was Steve Sarkisian told us. I saw someone put Tom Herman over here, and Blake mentioned Tom Herman, so I had Tom Herman on the brain. But Steve Sarkisian said that he was going to stay behind in rehab. Catch, rehab is not necessarily something that you just do for a couple of days and then you're done. Like, if he was that close to being back on the field, Catch, logic to me would say, all right, he just rests up this week and then he's back. the fact that he had to rehab this past week shows me that couple of things. One, he's definitely not close to 100%. Two, when he comes back, you're not going to waste Malik Murphy or risk, especially if you had a setback. You've got to be very careful with him, I believe, for the rest of the spring, especially since he had some sort of setback in that ankle. So as a result of that catch, I would be surprised. Even if he's out there, the question is always going to be how much is he participating?
Yep.
But, coaches, this, and again, this is why I say we use our 50 to 60 years combined. Coaches aren't really known for trying to risk their guys' health in spring ball, right? For the most part, they're really, really soft and gentle. For a guy like Malik with this injury history as it is, I think we can deduce that we're probably not going to see him a lot. And if he is, it's going to be limited for the next couple of weeks. And then that will put him further behind the Arch thing. Again, I hate to say it, and I keep saying it. I'm doing a tally in my head. Three spring practices for Arch Manning, 0 for Malik Murphy in 2 seasons. Those are the things that kind of have you fall behind in a QB battle, no matter what the coach will say. And he's going to say all the right things on the podium, but you and I have been in this business long enough to know what this all means.
Yeah, if he was close, truly close, then you would think we would have seen a little bit more activity out of him in the week that they did have practices, right? I mean, he was pretty much just out. It wasn't like he was going through minimum stuff with a black jersey on and then stop working out once they went to team and it gets a little bit more aggressive. He really was on the sidelines, and you would expect some baby steps in their effort to not have a setback. When he does come back, it'll probably be a case of him ramping it up over time and not automatically coming back as 100% participant. I mean, we'll see. You and I want to see Malik on the field. He's an incredibly talented kid. There will be a point, though, I think this spring, where if it's not happening, you and I are just going to have to give a shoulder shrug at what's taken place at the backup quarterback position, because I find it interesting that it seems like both of the Texas quarterbacks stayed back and worked on their craft this week. You reported in the War Room on Thursday that Quinn Ewers really focused on football in this week. There's no Cabo. There's no.
No.
And look, it's funny because I was talking with somebody close to Quinn about this maybe 8 months ago, and they were like, God, he hasn't had a break in a couple of years. Let the kid go and have spring break and enjoy himself for a week. And I was like, I feel you. I agree with you, but this ain't show friends, it's show business. And there's an anticipation that guys like Quinn are just dedicated to they don't get to do what the other guys get to do. It's different at quarterback. And I don't know, none of us can say for certainty what it means for the season that Quinn is seemingly just a lot more dedicated to everything that he does, focused on being the best quarterback he can be. But I like it. I can't tell you that he's going to be all Big 12 yet, but I can tell you there's nothing about Quinn so far in 2023 that I feel you can nitpick. Whereas there was a lot of nitpicking leading up to last season. And I think it does speak to maturity, growth, a desire to get better from a year ago. It hasn't just come easy for him. And that it looks like, Arch Manning did similar things, staying home, working with quarterback coaches, getting his workouts in. So I like that from the quarterback position. If I don't hear, as unfortunate for them as it may be, that any vacations took place for the quarterbacks in 2023, I will take that as a sign they're 1,000% dialed in on being the best players they can be in 2023. And I think you and I, we've said this for years, and we'll spend less than an hour, but we'll spend a good chunk of change in the rest of this video talking about other positions. And you know what? Those other positions matter a lot less if your quarterback play is dynamite. When it's not, everything else has to set up almost perfectly. But when you've got great quarterback play, as all of those Oklahoma teams that won conference championships for most of the last decade have proven, you can have some warts on your team. You can be bad on defense. If you're great at quarterback, it just covers up so many sins. And for me, this level of dedication from Quinn Ewers is how he harnesses all of that ability and gets to that level.
Yeah, Catch. I think the good part for Quinn, one of the things that we reported is that, last season was kind of a wake up call, for him as a young quarterback. I mean, look, at the end of the day, say what you want to say, there was never really a huge quarterback battle between him and Hudson Card. I think we all entered that knowing it was just a matter of when that Quinn would be the number one guy, as a matter of if ever was going to be a real if. We understood that at the end of the day, he got his guy. And that was going to be the guy that he worked with. It was going to be Quinn. I think Quinn probably understood that as well. And he goes in and the thing that happens sometimes with young guys is they're so talented kids. You've seen this year after year, all the years you've covered it, so talented in high school, so many degrees above everybody else. And then you're just thinking to yourself, it's going to happen naturally. This is some of the things that even Quinn has admitted. Okay. And then he realizes different level, different things I got to do. And now let me bring apart this intensity, because he has a big picture goal. The big picture goal was always for Quinn to be at Texas for a short period of time, enter the NFL draft, go do his thing. So this is the year. This is that year where he wants to have a good year. He wants to have a breakout season. And I know sometimes when I say this, Catch, people get they get upset about it because they don't understand, if Quinn achieves all those goals, the team goals will occur as well. So just because he sets a goal of, trying to be the best because he wants to be number one, that's like if I say I want to be the best beat writer, and you're like, well, what about Orangebloods? Well, if I am the best beat writer, that reflects on Orangebloods. So his individual goals is not in spite of or despite of. And so he's set these individual goals. He's working towards it. To your point, the guy's cut the hair, shaved it off, shaved the beard off. We know these are indications of, okay, a guy is just saying, this is a new me. It's a new person. He did, to your point, last year, there was some people who were upset that he decided to take a week off. And this week he worked back with his quarterback coach. Guy who also was the Patrick Mahomes quarterback coach out in the Dallas area. And so, he was really, really, doing the thing. It helps to know that Arch was doing the same thing as well, and so I don't think he views Arch as a threat by any stretch of the imagination, but it helps to know, okay, there's other guys in this room as well who are going to be pushing you a little bit. So I think, to your point, Catch, if you're in the Texas team, last thing I'll say, Catch, and right before spring break, everyone's like, what you going to do? And Quinn is like, hey, man, Quinn, what are you going to do? Man, I'm going to work out my QB coach 5 days a week. We're going to break down some film, this and that. I'm working with some receivers, this and that. What are you guys doing? We was just going to go to Miami. Now you're like, oh, snap. Maybe when we're in Miami, we need to put in some work just in case. I think so that leadership also helps and affects as well.
Couple of things, and we'll move on to the running backs and then just work our way down the line. I think it also probably shows that standard wasn't set before he got on campus last year. So I don't mean to take a shot at Hudson Card. I literally don't know what Hudson Card did last spring break. However, had he been working out for 5 days and Quinn was in Cabo, I feel like it would have been reported. It would have got out, right? One guy. I think what we were looking at is that it's been kind of standard operating procedures. I bet a couple of years ago with Casey Thompson probably wouldn't have enjoyed himself a little bit on spring break. I think there has probably been a standard. And again, I am not begrudging these guys to enjoy their spring break. If Quinn balls out this year and has an All-America season and he comes back next year and next year he wants to go to Cabo for vacation, you can get to a point where you've earned that, I think. I think that Quinn is still at a stage where he's trying to get to a level where that would be. I saw, oh gosh, somebody, it might have been, I can't remember, one of the guys that's working to get drafted.
Jalen Carter?
No, it was one of the Texas guys mentioned on social media this week that they, after the pro days and everything, that they were finally ready to kind of relax and like have a week off. And I was like, you've earned it. Like it's been nonstop. Like at some point you do get to have that. I think that part of what probably happened to Quinn last year was the expectation wasn't, hey, the quarterbacks stay back and work. Like I don't think that probably existed before he got here. I think the good news for the Texas football program is that next year your quarterbacks are starting. Now it's an expectation. Now it's a little bit of a new standard. Whether or not Quinn returns next year or not, you get the sense that Arch will probably make the most of his time. I think everybody else will follow the lead dogs. So I think it's really good for the quarterback room in general that there's an expectation now that that's the expectation. If we transition over to running back, because you and I are both not looking for this video to go, we can spend an hour on the quarterbacks, but we work our way through some other positions. Running back this week starts to be interesting as well, because we've talked about it in the previous weeks that they've been able to get their 5-star true freshman running back some early second team reps. He and Jaden Blue both being able to work with the 1s and 2s while Keelan Robinson has been out along with our guy Jonathan Brooks. You know, I'm curious to see what it looks like this week. Who's back? Who's not back? And are the reps going to continue to be divided really amongst 2 guys? Or, you know, will CJ Baxter get pushed back a little bit now? Like, what happens when Jonathan Brooks returns to full speed? I mean, we'll only know that when Jonathan Brooks returns to full speed. In the meantime, CJ Baxter gets some of that Arch Manning run with the second team. And at some point, there will be a really interesting Jaden Blue, CJ Baxter battle. If you took the other guys out of the mix, and then for the next couple of weeks, let's just say it's just those 2 guys, somebody emerges as the best of those 2 guys, and that will matter when we get to August, and there's a pecking order as they get ready to go into the season.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that, Kutch, because when I think of that room, right, to me, Keelan Robinson, I feel like his role is already set. Right. You know, no matter what, even if he misses some more time in the spring, we know what Keelan Robinson's role is to come in, be kind of a gadget guy, third down kind of guy, change of pace, be great on special teams, you know, like that.
He doesn't even need a spring.
Really? No, really. He's good. Like you're good with Keelan, you know, take your time. We'll see you when you see you. You know, the other guys are the ones that become interesting for me because Jonathan Brooks, like, you know, Jonathan Brooks, clearly he's been here. You know, clearly the staff is familiar with him, but I don't think he's got enough skins on the wall where he's like Keelan Robinson, where you could say your position is solidified. You know, if Bijan got hurt or Roshan got hurt last season, when you come back, you're really good to go. You can't say that for Brooks, and so you know this will be interesting. When Brooks started. When we start kind of talking about Malik, kind of the ramp up, you know, we saw that with Brooks last week, where all of a sudden you saw him like at least participating in the stretching portion and then kind of going off. So you can tell that they're trying to ramp him up just a little bit. But again, you know, we'll see how much contact will he be allowed to have, you know, going in. Again, I don't know how much you really want to, you know, really have, put a guy at risk, you know, coming back. So then again, that leaves that I think the Jaden Blue, CJ Baxter conversation, Brooks will all be very fascinating. Sarkisian went out of his way to really praise Jaden Blue and the progress that he's made and being able to run between the tackles. And he seemed to be really impressed by that. You know, CJ Baxter, you know, they seem to, you know, of course, like him, but as a freshman everything you do it's kind of like a bonus. Like, it's not the expectation. You have expectation for a freshman, but the forgiveness level is always going to be pretty high with guys like that because they're super young. So Brooks, for me, is a guy that you want to see on the field for this competition, because if not, it really becomes a 3-man race at this point, into which we'll see what happens at the end of the spring. But I think you want Brooks, on the field as quickly as possible for that one.
I've got 2 follow-up questions for you.
All right.
Have we anointed Jonathan Brooks too early, given that it's not like he's Roschon Johnson last year, where, well, he rushed for 500 or 600 yards and now it's his turn. And it didn't happen in the bowl game in a way where in the first crack had he exploded in the Alamo Bowl, like I think a lot of us thought he might have, it's his job. Have we anointed him the starting quarterback, the starting running back too early? And then my follow-up question to that is, at what point, and this could all be rendered moot if he's 100% goer tomorrow, but is there a point in the spring where if he's not back and Blue and Baxter are killing it, that when he does come back, it's not as much of a sure thing as Blue goes to the second team and Baxter goes to the third team, and it all kind of just nice and easily kind of like expands that way? Is there a point where in your mind they just got 3 running backs and now they're all competing for their spots in 2 chairs?
I definitely think there's something to the first part, what you said, as far as anointing too early, because a lot of this catches based off of practice reports that we hear about Brooks. And I mean, you talk to people, I talk to people, and people will tell you like, oh my gosh, Brooks, you look so amazing in practice, and look how good he looks in practice, so on and so forth, right? We hear that all the time, and I've heard people that will try to convince you that there won't be a drop off in productivity when Jonathan Brooks comes in. Like, he's just going to pick up from where, Bijan and Roschon left off. And I think you and I have been doing this long enough to know, like, okay, we got to see that. Because, at the end of the day, and again, I don't want this guy to feel like he's just catching scuds in the living room. But, we heard this about Hudson Card and how amazing he was in practice. And we heard, he's got an arm like Aaron Rodgers. He throws the ball like nobody's business. Like, we heard all of that about Hudson. Even after that bowl game catch, when Casey Thompson played so well, all we heard was Casey never did that in practice. Wait till you see Hudson, and then at the end of the day, he got out there and it never really lived up to the things that we heard about in practice. So I do believe there's a certain degree of what you're saying as far as anointing too early. Give me the second portion of that, the second question too, Catch.
Just, is there a point in the spring where so much time has passed and Blue and Baxter will have received so much of spring workout reps that it won't be as crystal clear that when he returns, he's at the top of the running back food chain and everything else just flows behind him? Yeah,
I think, to me, Catch, if we're going into the spring games in April, if we're not seeing Brooks out there this week, in kind of full contact kind of stuff, there's a part of me that wonders, okay, what does this look like? Because again, the depth chart, you want that kind of thing kind of solidified after the spring ball. That would only give him about maybe like 2 more weeks of that, and maybe some practices. It's not bad because Brooks knows the plays, so that portion of it is going to be good. But sometimes with these coaches, out of sight, out of mind sometimes, and so you got to get out. When I'm comparing, Jaden Blue film in spring versus Jonathan Brooks film, if I'm comparing, CJ Baxter film versus someone else, like, that's what you're going to judge it on, and you got to have some tape that's out there. And because after this Catch, then you just go into the summer workout portion of it, and then you got to wait until training camp. And for everything that's on the line this season, I don't think this is a position that you can just wait until training camp until it's 100% determined. So for me, I think this has got to be a kind of a huge week to have Brooks out there, at least participating in. If he can't do it this week, at least participate in at least 2 of the scrimmages.
I mostly agree with you. I think that Brooks gets a little benefit of the doubt because he has performed well in games, even if mostly in mop-up duty. I don't look too much at the bowl game. The bowl game was an opportunity that it wasn't seized, doesn't mean the worst thing in the world. I think the real question mark for me is, do either of those 2 young running backs give you young Xavier Worthy vibes? Remember when Worthy showed up, instantly it was like, oh, he's our best wide receiver.
Yes.
And had somebody thought they were going to be starting at wide receiver at a certain spot, it all changed once that guy showed up and established himself.
Facts.
I wonder, less with Blue, which maybe not is fair to him because he could certainly fill this role as well. It's been so long since we've seen him in a game that matters. Like, I just don't know what to think about Jaden Blue, but CJ Baxter comes in with a huge resume, huge recruiting credentials. If I told you that Jonathan Brooks was healthy and CJ Baxter by August started to look like the best running back on the team, I don't think that would shock anybody because there are expectations that CJ Baxter is eventually going to be an NFL level running back. Like, that's what he was recruited to be. So at what point, if at all, in the spring, do people in the program start to look at each other and go, Baxter's freaking amazing? You don't do that in the first week. But now pads come on and they stay on and you go through scrimmages. And suddenly, if he's that guy, it starts to materialize a little bit in practice. And at that point, it won't be anything Jonathan Brooks can do, whether he's healthy or not. If CJ Baxter starts to become that guy, him getting second team reps and the occasional first team reps ramps up that potential progress to where he could be that guy. That's what I'll be looking. I'm waiting to hear before the middle of April. CJ Baxter is the freaking truth. We're not quite hearing that yet. Nothing but good things, but I hadn't heard anybody come out yet with some hyperbole and say, we think he's better. We think he's Bijan. We think, you know what I mean? We think he's at least as good as Roshan. That hasn't started to happen yet. But if it does, and Brooks isn't playing, then I think the running back position's a free-for-all going into August. And that might be one of the position battles we would be focused on the most with regards to pecking order.
And by the way, last thing I'll say before we switch to another position, Sarkisian made a point the other week to note that throughout his career, he's always had 1,000-yard running back. And that's so clearly that means something to him. You know, when coaches start going to, their resume.
I agree.
That means something to him.
He knows that stat.
Yeah, he does. So because he pointed that out, I that's why I think to myself, like, that guy, he's, is going to get the workload. Like, that guy is going to get the carries. There's not going to be, a 50-50 kind of situation. That guy will get all the carries. Number 2 guy will get some of them. And so it'll be very important for that person to establish themselves. And I don't know what Kevin means, but he means Ingram and Bijan. Does he mean?
Well, Ingram was your starting. I think it's a great point. Ingram was a starting running back with NFL. He's on an NFL roster right now.
Yeah.
But at some point, it became obvious he wasn't Bijan, that Bijan was just different. And I think that's the one thing I wonder about, is if in this world, Jonathan Brooks is the Keontae Ingram guy and CJ Baxter is the Bijan guy. It's too early to know that, but it would not have helped Keontae Ingram once Bijan showed up on campus to just start giving Bijan all of his reps.
Yeah, fair enough.
Wide receiver. Do we feel like we know how that's going to unfold? Is there any reason for us to talk about wide receivers for more than 2 minutes?
No, because I don't necessarily. Here's the only thing. The only thing that's going to be interesting about this catch, not the top guys. I think we feel pretty good about knowing AD Mitchell is going to probably have one side, Xavier will have the other side. You've got Jordan Whittington, working in the slot kind of stuff. So I think for the most part we feel good about that. The only thing that's going to be interesting is where does the Jonte Cooks and more, it's like where do they fall in? Because I mean those guys that hit the ground running, and Jonte is going to play this. Let's just be clear, he is going to play. So he is going to be taking playing time away from somebody. It's just a matter. It's just a matter of who. It's just that's the only thing for me as far as the receivers is who amongst us who's going to be the person that stands up to that guy who's in beast mode right now. And it's just like when people are randomly coming up to me in practice to tell me about how good Jonte is, like who's going to be the person that has the skill or athletic ability to stop him? Because right now, Catch, I don't know how many people are going to be able to stop him.
He's what I'm wondering if CJ Baxter becomes. The guy that when you roll up to practice, people, and at that point, it's like whoever's in front of him, he's going to play. Someone's losing snaps. He's the perfect example, maybe even more than Xavier, of if he starts to look that way at running back, that's money coming out of somebody's pocket at some point. And I'm with you. It's about the good thing for Arch at the second team quarterback position that he'll roll out there tomorrow. And AD Mitchell presumably will still be second team. Like they haven't elevated him up yet. They're making him earn it. So he's going to have AD Mitchell, Jonte Cook, and like DeAndre Moore to work out with. That's not bad.
No.
That makes you a better quarterback when you've got first team level guys to work out with. I think it's the one advantage that Arch has that maybe other backup quarterbacks that have been trying to prove themselves with the twos haven't had in recent years. I mean, they just haven't had the depth. This looks like a team that's going to have real depth at wide receiver, so much so that if you don't crack the top 5 or 6, you probably have to start worrying about where you belong in this program. No, I'm with you, and it's hard to get your hands on Jonte Cook stock right now without it costing a lot. It's like everybody seems to know. And for the rest of the spring, how high he can ascend. Is he starting to get reps with the ones type of discussion will be the thing to watch. Tight end?
Nah.
It's Jatavion Sanders and the rest.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, I mean, you've got a guy who's probably going to play one more year in college. It's probably a better conversation next year when we try to figure out who's going to replace him.
The offensive line is interesting primarily because you think you know at least who the first team guys are, and you don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about it. They've got to figure out who can play with the twos and not just be warm bodies.
Yeah, I mean that portion of it is interesting. Again, Peyton Kirkland kind of comes to mind, Catch, a little bit as far as a young guy, the new guy. But to the other point, though, Catch, I mean, they have guys who have been, within the system out from that last class who have, been here, who've been, kind of cooking and growing as well. So it's interesting that I think, Kirkland was running with the twos. And I mean, he seems to be kind of solidified at that spot already.
But they don't have anybody else.
Yeah,
so,
correct.
I mean, he could suck, and he's still running with the twos.
Yeah. I'll be very interested. What throws off everything, and not a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination, is Christian Jones coming back kind of just closes the door on that side of the ball, and so now all of a sudden guys who you thought might come in, like you thought Cam Williams comes in on that right side, now all of a sudden you say, he's going to have to wait, and what do you have to do with him? So is he still like a special teams guy primarily, this upcoming season? But yeah, who fills in the interior? I think is good. You know, the interesting part, I was trying to go through it, Catch, because you know, we know that DJ Campbell's obviously been getting the reps just because of the you know, the injury you know, situation. You know, but you know, there's Malik Agbo, there's Neto. You know, there's a bunch of other guys who are there in that two deep. So how that gets sorted out this year, you know, Catch, it may just be a situation where you just got guys who got to sit another year, you know, and that's what it is. And maybe just having a Pancake Factory NIL deal is just enough for you to say, all right, I'll chill out and wait my turn. You know, that I'm necessarily going to turn down found money just because I'm upset.
I think I look at it from the standpoint of, and it's funny because I asked this, I think, on the modcast last week, who's your sixth guy on the offensive line? Mm-hmm. Alex seems convinced that it's going to be Cam Williams, and maybe it will be. I tend to think it will be either Campbell or Hudson. Mm-hmm. That when Hudson comes back and he's healthy, whoever becomes the starter at right guard, the loser is your sixth guy.
Yeah.
But then it's like, who's your seventh guy? Who's your eighth guy? They're not going to be 10 deep, but they need to be probably 8 deep so that if Kelvin Banks misses 2 games with a groin injury, I don't know, I'm trying to make something up that's not like a bad injury, but like just the kind of injury that would make a guy miss a couple of weeks. What do you do at that point at left tackle? How much? I can't imagine that Peyton Kirkland, even as the backup left tackle, is truly the backup left tackle. Mm-hmm. But I don't know who they think where they're strongest at next that they could move. I don't know. Let's say Christian Jones has played the position, so he obviously would be a possibility. But maybe you're moving a guard over to tackle. I mean, they've always, last year at this. Right before the season started, Herman Sarkisian mentioned, I've got Tom Herman on the brain today too. Too many athletic articles.
Yeah. I did read that article. It's pretty good, actually.
And FAU played last night in basketball, and so I just had Herman on the brain a lot. He always mentioned that he thought DJ Campbell's long-term position was at tackle. He's at guard right now. So all of these guys that are second seasons, not including Kelvin Banks, I'm just kind of wondering where they're truly at with their progressions. Has the light bulb truly flipped on? Are they a year away? I think that's one of the big questions just for the rest of the spring. Who further cements themselves among the backups as players that these coaches believe they can trust once the season begins? I think they've got 5 backup guys right now. And because Hudson hasn't been practicing, I don't know how many of these dudes at all, if there's even one, that they truly would trust if they had to play them or they'd be crossing their fingers. It kind of remains to be seen.
By the way, Catch, someone in the chat had asked who the backup center is. That's Sawyer Gorham Welch at this moment. Just want to make sure I address that for you guys. And by the way, if you're on Orangebloods, you would have that. So, but next time we have a promo, feel free to sign up. We'll have one coming up soon.
Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. If we start with the defensive line,
okay,
it's the defensive end, that jack position opposite Baron Sorrell that a year ago Ovie Oghoufo was playing. That's the single biggest battle, I think, that's taking place on the entire defense right now. Mm-hmm. So whether it's either Ethan Burke, Colton Vasek, whether or not Justice Finkley truly emerges as the best player at that position, I think that battle is the one for the next 12 practices. When we go to the spring game, just outside of the quarterbacks, that will be the thing during the spring game that I watch the most. Who is good?
No, I would 100% agree with you on that one. That's, like you said, we feel good about Sorrell. It's kind of like you can check that box. You're good. It's not much to really speak on as far as that is concerned. And props to him. And I'm sure Daddy's around somewhere. But up to your point, the other side, when it comes to the Ethan Burke and I think you and I were both high on him. I know I was high on him, coming out of high school. He did have some, did get to play, last season, did have some productivity there. But there is Vasic that's in there as well. There's a bunch of different guys, like you said, Finkley, where you're just wondering, okay, who's going to be the person that takes that over? Who's going to be that guy? That if there is, there's a benefit to this for the, as we talked about a lot, Catch, like a lot of positions are just probably kind of set in stone. This is probably the most up in the air coin toss kind of position, I think, on all the entire team. And because of that, because I think when we start talking about, linebackers, we're going to be kind of there, like DBs, we're going to kind of know where everyone else is at, just a couple of variations. This is the one that I think is as wide open as can be. To your point, yes, 100% with you as far as figuring out who's going to be the guy that ends up being the number one, and then who's the backup.
And I wonder if they don't platoon these guys to a certain extent. That Finkley, for me, feels like a guy at the point of attack in the run game is probably best suited at that position to play. But then if it's 3rd and 8, is Finkley the guy? Does he bring the pass rush chops? That he's the number one guy? It's part of why I think this spring is really important. If there was another position not named quarterback that should have just stayed home during spring break and kept their focus up and worked with private trainers and were ready to go starting tomorrow, it would probably be the players at this position, because I think they're all bunched together. None of them are so proven that they really have an edge. Justice Finkley's been rolling out with the ones right now, but he's unproven. I feel like we think we know what his skill set looks like, but he's been on campus now for over a year, and maybe that changes slightly. So I'm fascinated to see where that thing rolls out. Your defensive tackle depth is fine. We can argue about or debate the quality of the high-end starters and whether or not Murphy or Sweat should be first team all Big 12 or second team all Big 12 or whatever. But like that position group's perfectly fine. And I think the hierarchy there is established. I think you'd like to find a backup behind Sorrell, which it's probably Finkley if someone else – like Finkley right now is kind of a jack of all trades. It actually makes him a very valuable guy on this team, that he's probably the true – if Barron Sorrell got hurt for the rest of the spring, it's a good question. If they just put Sorrell on ice and said, you know what, you're fine, we got to learn about these other guys, I really don't know. To me, Finkley's the backup there, but he's competing for a starting job elsewhere. So I think the roles that are going to be earned, they're fascinating. And the sooner they can figure those things out, the better this defense in the fall will be. If we move on to linebacker, isn't it really how long it takes Anthony Hill to truly spread his wings and fly? Simple as that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this one's a tough situation because, guys are working hard and guys get compliments. And so, everyone talks up David Benda, right? And what he's been able to kind of do this spring. But, it's one of those we expect Hill at some point to surpass him. It seems, but, I'm sure Benda will probably – he's probably heard that, and I'm sure that's probably gotten him fired up and motivated as well. So, that's no disrespect because how our show goes. An hour later, we start getting DMs from mad parents and mad players about stuff that we say. But Hill's it's Hill. I think he's here for a reason. He's on campus for a reason. And that reason is for him to just kind of grow, develop into that role, and then eventually probably take over and be the starter and name the starter at some point in the fall.
Maurice Blackwell would be the other guy, though, that I would say, hey, he does get his name mentioned. He's still a young guy. He's got a unique skill set in that he's a little bit of a tweener.
Yeah.
Even through the first couple of years, it was like, is he a safety? Is he a linebacker? He seems to be a linebacker who's got some safety traits, which, we don't really know. This linebacker unit is so thin that we haven't even had a chance to really get into, well, who replaces Diamante Tucker Dorsey as a third linebacker when they go to 3 linebacker sets? Like, it could be, to me, I've always envisioned Blackwell from a stature size standpoint kind of has a Tucker Dorsey vibe, and that, if you just eyeball Tucker Dorsey for the first time, you might go, what does he do? Oh, he's a linebacker, but yeah, he thrives in pass down situations. He can play in coverage. So I think Blackwell's a guy we shouldn't forget because I think he's got a chance to play some snaps. But it's Anthony Hill's world at some point. I think we would all agree.
Yeah, but to your point, though, I will definitely have to agree with you. But he's looked good when I've been out there. Like when I've seen him, he looks good. He looks the part. I mean, he's definitely got all the traits that you want out of that position. So to your point, I won't sleep on him. Like if there's a guy who may be able to hold off someone like for a little bit, I won't sleep on Mo Blackwell at all. Not at all.
He's the most versatile of all those guys.
Yeah.
Now that I think Overshown's was taken for granted. So versatile, he could do anything at linebacker. Maybe nothing great, but he did everything really well. And Tucker Dorsey, kind of the same thing. Not a great player, but definitely a guy that you could have on the field and feel confident about. And I think that's a position where all of those guys are trying to earn that confidence. If we go to the secondary, I suppose to me it's about transfers. Gavin Holmes, does he continue to come on? And at some point they're going to have – this will be a world where they probably want to get their 5 best guys on the field. And it might not mean that all of the guys end up playing the exact position that they're playing in the spring. So if they get to a point where they're like, we have to have Gavin Holmes and Terrence Brooks on the field at the same time, then you maybe move some pieces around and work it out. Jalen Catalon's been limited, so it's hard to know. It's hard to speak about the safety position right now without all of the parts being healthy. But there are a couple of transfer pieces and a couple of young pieces, just how those guys continue to develop and find comfort inside a secondary that does return some guys. I mean, it's a secondary that does return, Barron. It returns
Watts.
Thank you. I was just having a brain malfunction for a second. You look at the safety position. It returns Jaron Thompson. So they return some good players. None of those players were All-Americans or all Big 12 level guys a year ago. But they were all guys that if you told me they earned all Big 12, I think all 3 of those guys could be all Big 12 players this year. So those 3 guys you feel like have jobs. And now there's Holmes, there's Brooks, there's Catalon. Like there's a number of guys whose names you'll spit out there that have to fit into, I think, the 3 guys that are probably entrenched in their positions.
Yeah, I would agree. When you start talking about the DBs, like out, for overreaction Monday, maybe it's not too much of an overreaction, but just based on what I've seen in practice, Watts and Barron look like future NFL players to me. Yeah. They look like future NFL draft picks, quite honestly. So, both of those guys, just from athletic ability, versatility, speed, size, I mean, all of that, like, they're just – you go out of practice and certain guys, you just see them, you're like, oh yeah, that guy's different. And you could just tell, like, there's guys who are doing something like, those guys are totally different. So you've got that. But like you said, you've got the Brookses of the world, Holmes, where he's fit in. The safety portion is not, bad. So, and it's still, we're waiting to see what Malik Muhammad does and his development. I've seen him out at practice. I think he'll be, to me, Catch, I think he'll be in the mix a little bit later. From what I can tell, from what just the naked eye, I can see the talent there, but I can see that there's probably some need to get a little bit stronger for Malik. I just get that muscle definition. I think this offseason will be a big offseason for him, as far as getting a little bit stronger, then a little bit more comfortable with things that they're doing out there. It's not saying he's bad or anything to that stretch. It's not a bust, just young. So he's been on campus for a couple of months. So I think he's a little bit further away from that conversation that we're having right now. But yes, this will be another one when you start talking about like what 5 that you put out there. Of course, there's still like the Xavier Bryces, Austin Jordans. There's a lot of guys in the mix, but who ends up being your top 5? I'll be interested to see how that'll be another good battle, Catch, as far as which guys do they eventually throw out there.
I hate to hit someone with a stray.
Oh, damn.
But it feels like there's an elephant in the room, and I just want to say it once. It's possible that Deshaun Jameson just wasn't good enough, and that we look at him now, wasn't invited to the combine, and it was like, whoa, Deshaun Jameson didn't get invited to the combine. That was kind of a story, a thing. Then he ran on the pro day, and it was like, okay. I don't think he helped himself with the way he ran. He wasn't great on the field. The NFL is telling us they don't think he's a top guy. And then he didn't test out like a top guy at his pro day. That guy played a lot last year. And as we're just talking about how hard it's going to be to get all of the really talented guys on the field this year, I wonder if just in reality, we just didn't spot it in time that Deshaun Jameson got to be as good as he was ever going to be as kind of a sophomore, and then just couldn't get better because there's a cap on how much better a really small guy who doesn't have elite athletic intangibles can be. And I wonder if they're just going to have better players out there this season, that addition by subtraction, not because he's a bad guy or anything like that. He might just not be an NFL level player. And this needs to be a secondary that's got a bunch of future NFL guys in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they definitely do. Like you could definitely tell that. And to your point, like it wasn't, like you say, it's no disrespect. I think there's levels to this thing, Catch. And there's guys who are okay or good in college, and then there's guys who are next level kind of players. And right now, Deshaun, I think his early start to his career, especially from the punt return aspect, kind of built up that mystique of who he was. And then now all of a sudden, you keep going on a couple of years later, and you're just like, okay, good college player, nothing wrong with that, Letterman. But yeah, they do have some guys that potentially could take over and potentially be just a little bit better, at that position. Because like I said, when I start looking at those guys out there, because Deshaun was also a little bit smaller. Like when it was all said and done, I think he's ended up being about 5'9" or so. Maybe at most 5'10". I think his size was around 5'9"-ish. So, these guys are way bigger, way stronger. And I think that ends up being like a huge difference going forward.
When Texas was great, like under Mac Brown, every dude in that secondary was an NFL draft pick. And at its zenith, you're just talking about a bunch of guys that were first and second round picks. I mean, you go back to that national championship game and you had 2 Thorpe Award winners eventually with Michael Huff and Aaron Ross. You had Michael Griffin, who was a first-round pick. You had Terrell Brown, Cedric Griffin. Like, all of those dudes were first, second, third-round type guys. You go to the 2009 team, and you got Earl Thomas and, You look at Alabama, you look at Georgia. Those are teams that their top 5 guys all play in the NFL. But their top 8 guys all play in the NFL. That's where, if you're Texas, you need to get in the secondary. And I think if we look at this Texas roster right now and we freeze it and we say they're not going to be draft picks next year, but just how many guys out of the current secondary pieces do they have will eventually play on Sundays? Watts, Barron. I think Thompson's got a chance to play on Sundays. He was pretty good last year. I wonder if he makes a jump this year. I definitely think Terrence Brooks is going to be a Sunday guy in time. I don't know enough yet about the gap. I don't know about Gavin Holmes. I don't know about Jalen Catalon. So they're not there yet. But I think Malik Muhammad, if everything – I mean, that's a guy, if he puts the pieces together, he's a future NFL player. So they're getting closer there. I think this season will be a step forward in that area. Anything else related to the team that you want to get into today?
No, Catch. I think we've really covered it. Can I just everyone keeps bringing this up in the chat. I don't know what I've clearly have missed something as it relates to the team. Just off topic. Why is everyone freaking out about Garrett Wilson? Is it just because of his retweet of the Texas thing?
I don't understand that either, other than Texas fans, like all college football fans, I'm not separating Texas. They like to get in their feelings about the dumbest things. And the Garrett Wilson thing, I think, was completely related to basketball.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I like Texas, and I like it when they're suddenly doing well. He was making reference to Dylan Dessou having a big March, and that Texas is taking local talent to help them have success in basketball. People took that to mean that maybe Tom Herman didn't make Garrett Wilson a priority. They've been looking for a reason to get mad at Tom. And it's like, no, Tom recruited the hell out of that guy. He always wanted to go to Ohio State. So I haven't really understood the Garrett Wilson. I looked at Garrett. That thing got retweeted or liked like 10,000 times. And it was like, God, Texas people are in their feelings over Garrett Wilson. Don't. No big deal. It's no big deal.
And I mean, there is a story that one day will be told on what happened as relates to his recruitment. I don't want to set the world on fire as to what ended up being one of the things that turned him off. But it wasn't Tom Herman related. That I know. But
Maringer turns out to be a guy that wasn't very popular in his own locker room.
Yes.
So, I mean,
there was a heavy Drew factor in that one, more so than anything else. But I don't want Drew to catch strays on his.
But Ohio State was always a colossus that Texas was going to. And the thing is, he committed really. He was one of the first players in that 2017 class. Forgive me if 2017, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 2018. He was one of the first guys in that class that committed early, never really wavered. Why would he? He was an Ohio State kid who went back home to play in an offense that turns wide receivers into first-round picks on an annual basis. Like, his career at Ohio State went exactly like you thought his career at Ohio State would go. Played 3 years, caught a bunch of passes, played in some big games, first-round pick in the NFL. At the time, Texas didn't have that going for them.
Yeah. And
to be completely honest, they still don't. I mean, they still haven't cranked out a first-round NFL wide receiver. You hope that Xavier can get there. You wonder about A.D. Mitchell. But, that was a weird thing yesterday, Anwar. Totally didn't get it.
Okay. I've still I kept coming up in the chat here as well. And I'm just I
thought that was more Shaka shade than Herman shade. Because he's referencing the last bat. He's referencing not taking local kids. I don't think that's been a problem in football.
No, Sam Ellinger. I mean, if there's a local kid at Westlake or Lake Travis that's good, we haven't heard the story of, oh man, they don't try to get guys from their own backyard. Like that's always been a priority of getting guys in the backyard as far as from a football talent perspective.
If anything, you think they overrate the local talent, and it's like, is that guy really going to play, or do they just take that guy because he's a local guy? Now, there has been a lot of hoops talent, but yeah, I thought that was more shock of shade than it was anything else. He was referencing Dylan Dessou. What the hell does that got to do with the football program?
Zero. And I think the last thing I will say on this catch is, as a guy, I love to reference my relationships, right? And the thing is, like, you don't have to hate somebody that you were with in the past in order to be with the person that you're with in the present. So there's a lot of, I've got to find a reason to hate the previous coach in order to like the current coach. You don't have to find reasons to hate Tom Herman to like Steve Sarkisian. Like, you could just say it didn't work out, but there is this thing weird that, there's a feeling of, man, you gotta find a reason to hate Tom in order to pump up Sark. And I don't think that's necessarily the thing that needs to happen.
All right, guys, we would stay and chat for another 30 minutes. But it feels like both Anwar and I have it in us, no question about it. The issue is we both got kids home from school.
The hell what do they need a work day for?
I don't know.
What do you need a work day for after you've had a week off?
Our babysitting service, otherwise known as the public school system, decided that they needed one more day to add on to spring break, putting all of us out of, my kids were talking about their cousins going to 4-day week schools in the future. And I was like, to hell with that. 5 days. Count them out loud. We got to go, though. We got to go be parents. So do us a solid before you exit the chat. Like this video, please. Slam that like button. Subscribe to the channel. We are creeping up on 15,000 subscribers. In 5 years from now, that number will look funny that we made such a big deal out of hitting 15,000. But for right now, it'll be a nice little achievement for us as we continue to work to build the channel in the direction that we want it to go in. Do all of that stuff. Take the link of this video from your YouTube page and tweet it, Facebook it, do whatever it is that you want to do. Share it into the world so we can continue to grow. And, as we grow, the channel gets better. We have more fun. We get more sponsors. All of that stuff makes it's a win-win for everybody. But for now, for myself, for Anwar Richardson, for Blake holding it down, producing this video for us, you guys have a wonderful week, a wonderful Monday. We will talk to you tomorrow with the Modcast. You guys be good.